going to explain some of the various putties and materials I use, sculpting and conversions, modeling, various other things. Maybe you've not seen some of them before, so they might introduce you to something new, or some people might be a bit confused about the differences between particular ones, what they're better for, etc. So hopefully if you're maybe new to sculpting or modeling or a little bit confused, this might be of some help. And there are of course other materials, so if there's something you particularly want to ask about that's not this video, just leave a comment, and if I'm aware of it, I'll let you know. So probably the first one to start with is obviously green stuff, which I think most people have heard about or used. And this is what I used to do all my sculpting with. And when we were at Games Workshop, we used to always do everything in green stuff. So it's certainly good enough to sculpt with, and conversions, modeling, it's good for filling gaps. It's also quite sticky, good for sticking things together. It's dry, it can be cut, filed, etc., etc. It's if you're doing any type of probably if you're not really into modeling but just putting models together, green stuff's just good to have because it's good for filling gaps, good for if you want to do little things on bases. So if you just want a modeling material, just for in case you need it and you're not sure where to start, green stuff is a good one. You just can't go wrong with that. So that's a good. Some people do find it frustrating because of the stickiness if they're trying to learn to sculpt. So I'll give some alternatives to that in a minute. But yeah, green stuff's probably an essential. You can't go wrong with that. There is a liquid green stuff. I've not actually tried it. I'm guessing it's probably similar to the Vallejo plastic putty. It's almost just a liquid. But I don't particularly see a use for that. I'm guessing it's for things like filling gaps, but I would personally prefer just a putty because they're soft enough to just. But they could have their uses, just mainly I would assume for bases, or there might be certain things with very fine cracks where you can put it in and then wipe away the excess. But in terms of actual sculpting, I don't use anything like that. But something worth trying, and some people might find that useful. The other one that's probably less well known here is this is brown stuff, made by the same people as green stuff, and it's you just mix the two parts, but it is actually quite different. I mean, the general properties are the same. It's kind of a sticky, elasticy putty, and both of these you've got about an hour and a half, 2 hours just drying time, and then full cure is actually quite slow, probably overnight. Hour and a half to 2 hours working time. Brown stuff is a bit more, when you first mix it, got a slightly firmer feel, make it nice, a bit easier to start with for fine detail. And when it's dry, it's got a harder finish. Green stuff, when it's fully dry, has actually a bit of a flex to it. And brown stuff doesn't, it's very, very firm. It's a little bit more tricky to cut, etc. File. It's green stuff, you can do that a little bit easier, but the advantage of brown stuff is some people just like the colour better, but it is to start with a little bit nicer for fine detail. If you're using epoxy putty to sculpt, maybe you're doing little just conversions and details or sculpting little heads, you might, and even and using green stuff, you might find brown stuff that's actually nicer to use. So give it a try. Some people, you can actually mix the two together for kind of a mix of the two, but I'm not sure how much of a difference that really makes. But yeah, if you are, like I say, doing little details on a model, little sculpting little rope, ribbons, chain, things like that, you might actually find brown stuff nicer than green stuff. So that's worth a. As an all-rounder, you're probably better off with green stuff, but a little tip for both of these, you can see I've just cut off, they come in these long ribbons, And what I tend to do is just cut off a little bit like this that I'm probably going to use in the near future. Obviously this depends on how often and how much you use, and actually freeze the rest, because it can over 6 to 12 months they can go off a bit and become a bit not very nice to mix. And so by freezing it, you just preserve it for longer. Because my models are kind of 30 mil, and I primarily now sculpt in polymer clay, so I don't use too much green stuff or brown stuff. I use it regularly, but not a lot, so I freeze the rest. The next one probably most people have heard of is Milliput. This one's actually quite old and going off a bit. You can see the colour of this is. Milliput's another one that's really good to have. It's very soft to mix. It's fairly keeps its shape well when you first mix it. Quite fast drying. Very good for bases, things like that, because you get so much of it. It's quite cheap. You can mix a large amount if you need it. It's not, in my opinion, great for kind of actual sculpting, although I know some people do and some companies do. It tends to be a slightly larger scale. I personally don't like it for sculpting. I find it just too soft and difficult to use, but it's great for when it's dry. It's got a very rock hard smooth finish, so I use it for weapons, anything kind of straight line design where you kind of file and sand and get a nice sharp edge, which is why you may notice, if you've ever seen greens, you may notice the weapons are often a different colour, which is normally Milliput. And the other thing I use it for is I mix it probably 50-50 with green stuff, and I'll use that for what's called formers, something like cloaks or banners where you need a shape before you can finish it. I'll do another video showing this, but the advantage of Milliput, especially when it's mixed with green stuff, is it keeps its shape really well. So if you imagine you're making a cloak and you want it to be kind of, below flowing in the wind, once you mix that with a bit of the green stuff, gives it the flexibility, and the Milliput will keep it in shape for the most part. Whereas if you just had green stuff on its own, it tends to droop. And so that's a really good, one of the main properties I like about Milliput. Also very good for filling gaps, especially if you're doing something large. It's got large filling gaps. It's so soft and easy to mix. And obviously scenic detail, things like that, it's great for. You can get a super fine white. I personally don't use it. I've never really noticed much of a difference. I just prefer the standard. With Milliput, and this one I'm going to go through, actually this one, which I'll go through in a minute. Well, certain epoxy putties, some people can have a reaction to the epoxy on their skin, so you can get barrier creams or wear gloves. But Milliput tends to be, for the ones who do react to it, one of the nastier ones, so just be sure to wash your hands, and if you do have a reaction, just get some kind of barrier cream. Less so with green stuff, doesn't seem to be such a problem. And similar thing to this one. This is, we call it wood putty. I don't know if it's got an actual proper name. It comes in these long tubes. And we used to, back in the day, use this for all sorts of things at Games Workshop. But outside of that, I've never really heard or seen anyone using it, but it's really useful. So I guess they come under kind of quick. They come under the category of kind of quick drying sticks. And this one, I don't know if you can see, but you cut down the middle. In the middle, it's kind of got the bit that mixes with the outside. This one's got a working time of about 15 to 20 minutes, and then it'll cure rock solid in about 30 minutes. It really is quick drying. It's not great for actual sculpting, although I know some sculptors who actually made some amazing models with it, but it's really soft when you mix it. What it's great for is bulking out. If you're making something large and you need to just bulk quickly, and you want to dry quickly and be really firm, this is great for it. And one of the best qualities is once this is dry, it's so nice to cut and carve. It's so really, even though it's hard, it's very easy and nice to carve and get some nice edges on it. I don't use it too often. When I do, it's great. Sort of thing I'd use it for is if I'm making like a bust and I want to just bulk out or make it a very large model, like a giant or something. This is great for bulking out. It's quite hard to find, at least in the UK. I've seen it around, but it used to be quite easy to get hold of, but it seems to be the other ones. They do like a copper one, which is just really hard and quick drying. It's not so useful. Yeah, but this one, the times I've seen it recently is in DIY shops, but like a tiny, tiny sample of it for a lot of money. Occasionally you see it in shops that do like fish tanks, things like that. And I think I saw kind of a link somewhere in America so maybe if you're in America you might find it easy to get hold of. It's definitely something worth trying. Like I say, for actual sculpting, probably not so good, but it's one of those putties that you should just try it because depending on what you're doing, you might find it really useful for random things. Magic Sculpt I don't use too often. Very similar feel and look to Milliput, which is why I tend to use Milliput, but this one doesn't have the advantage of, when I was saying about Milliput, when you mix it with green stuff, holding its shape for formers. This doesn't tend to do that. This one, again, this is old and kind of going off a bit when you see that kind of off colour, it's going off. This one is a little bit, does have a kind of a finer finish than Milliput, so if you were doing some kind of sculpting or wanted this to have a finish, probably going to get a nicer finish than Milliput. But yeah, in general, I don't use that too often. I got this just to kind of try it. Nice for filling gaps. So if you are just filling gaps, you might find that a bit nicer than Milliput. I think it's quite expensive as well, but some people do sculpt with it. That brings us on to what broadly comes under the category of polymer clays, which is Fimo, Sculpey. There's one called Bees Putty, which is made by sculptors specifically for miniatures, which is nice. I use that occasionally. It's got, all of these have, even within their own ranges, different types. And you can get these big, in Sculpey they do the big blocks, which is what I tend to use as Sculpey medium. I use that for pretty much all my sculpting. All the models you see on the Black Sculpting website are pretty much made out of Sculpey medium. We'll have bits of green stuff and Milliput for the weapons and formers. But the main sculpting I do now is Sculpey. These are the different pack. The block I haven't got out just because I've got it put away at the moment, but they do all sorts of things. These smaller packs tend to be softer, and they do a firm as well. And again, Fimo's actually got quite a different feel, more of an elasticy. So if you are sculpting polymer clays, it's worth trying. Probably between Fimo Sculpting and Bees Putty's worth a go, just to see what you prefer. And I kind of have a mix of different things depending on what I'm doing. Generally, polymer clays are mainly just used for sculpting. You have to bake. The advantage is they don't dry till you bake them, but once you do bake them, they are quite fragile, so not so good for conversions if you're using it or for gaming or anything else, just because of the risk of it cracking or breaking at some point, as opposed to kind of these epoxy putties, which are very strong when they're. So if you're seriously getting into sculpting in any way, you certainly want to be looking at, if you're hand sculpting, you want to be looking at polymer clays in some way. And again, just play around. They've all got different types of. If you're unsure where to start, Sculpey medium's a good place to start. In general, we'll make an armature and put green stuff on first, just as a sticky layer. Then, whatever polymer clay you're using, have a thin layer over that, so it's got something to attach to. And after that, just use the polymer clays. Generally, you bake them for about 15 minutes in the oven. It's strange because for many years, all I used was green stuff. And one of the reasons for that is because when things were cast in metal, they were press molded, and you couldn't. at the time, press mold polymer clays, they were too fragile, they just break. So once you get used to sculpting green stuff, the idea of using a polymer clay just seems ridiculous. And back in early 2000s, Rackham Miniatures in France, they used to sculpt everything in polymer clay. In Fimo they used mainly. And we could not understand how they did it. It just seemed bizarre to us. And they couldn't understand why we were using green stuff. So, and now I use Fimo. It kind of makes sense. Or Sculpey, I should say. I think one of the reasons the confusion came because when you're first introduced to, if you just try polymer clay, you might just pick up one of these kind of normal, like Sculpey 3, and it's so soft, it's not nice to sculpt with. So until you get used to understanding that there's different firmness, different types, different firmness, it's very difficult to use. Because even the kind of medium can seem soft once you're used to green stuff, so you have to get used to it. For the people that do find green stuff kind of sticky and frustrating, have a go with polymer clays, and just takes some getting used to, and a kind of subtle, especially when making 30mm models. Some of these, you can see the sticker here. I got this in Hobby Lobby, which is a shop in America, which I love. They don't have that over here. The nearest we've got here is Hobbycraft, which is nowhere near as good as Hobby Lobby. Is amazing. I'm sure any Americans watching it probably don't think much of it, but I love it. If I'm ever in America and there's one nearby, I always try and go to it. And even here within the Fimo Professionals, like a firmer one, the soft is, and they do it kind of both brands and Bees Putty do every putty every colour, sorry, you can imagine. Yeah, so like I say, that's what I use sculpt with mainly now. And you'll see weapons done in Milliput, probably with a bit of green stuff mixed in. But yeah, that covers the main ones I use. Let me know if something you'd like to know about or a use, or there's something you want to do and you're not sure what to use. Like I say, if you're getting into sculpting, you probably I would suggest starting with polymer clays. You're going to need green stuff as well. You can sculpt just in green stuff, but I think if you really want it to start looking good after a while, you can just make the model look so much nicer with polymer clays. If you're doing just modelling work or conversions, green stuff, Milliput. Or if you're not doing any of that and you just want something and you're not sure what to get, just green stuff, you can't go wrong. It's not crazy expensive. If you're not using it too often, it'll last you a while. So yeah, I hope that helps. Let me know if there's any questions. Thanks for listening.